Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I'm your host, Krysta, and I'm here to bring you captivating stories from some of the most fascinating people I've connected with on my own journey of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Wild Remedies podcast. Today, we are talking with one of my best friends, Maddie, Elise, and we are going to be discussing a whole bunch of stuff related to nutrition. So I've actually been working with Maddie recently on some stuff for myself. I've had some symptoms that have been nagging me for a little while, and I've had a great time working with you. My body feels a lot better. I feel like I have some really great tools in my life for moving forward, and really valuable information that you have that I feel would be really beneficial to everybody listening.
I can't wait to share it. Yeah. I think it's so important that we get the foundations out there, right?
Yeah. So let's dive right into it, shall we?
Awesome. Absolutely.
Okay. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is just your background and how you landed into the land of nutrition.
Well, as I'm sure anyone who's been listening to the podcast, I feel like heal thyself, the archetype. It's what we're attracting right now. So I started off my life with a lot of chronic conditions. And by the time I was in high school, I had tried myriad prescriptions. I was constantly bedridden. I missed so much school. They almost didn't let me graduate because I was so ill all the time. I was allergic to everything. Yeah.
Same.
Where I think there's a certain person that ends up on this journey. And I was miserable. I was so miserable. I couldn't get out of bed. Everything was just really fucked. And for me, it was a lot of hormones, a lot of just feeling like my body did not work. And so I went traveling. Things got worse because, escaping your problems, you actually take yourself along the ride. And eventually I landed myself in holistic nutrition school. And I was looking for the Hail Mary. I was like, we got to figure something out. And thankfully I learned the science, and what I really learned through that time was actually how to start thinking about our bodies with a combination of science and experience, personal experience, embodied experience, and then using that to then decipher all of the information that's changing every 2 weeks, right? Eat meat, don't eat meat, eat sugar, don't eat sugar, eat this, don't eat that. And so, going to school, this was about 7 years ago now, I learned about food, but I learned about how to think more than anything. And so over the course of 7 years, I watched nutrition trends change. I watched my body change. I've gotten to a place where I, for the most part, can live a very healthy, vibrant, energetic life. And I can work 8 to 10 hours. And at the end of the day, have energy to go do stuff and do things like hang out with you in the evenings. And that to me is really what nutrition is about. So the journey really comes from being sick, being unwell, and then healing myself very slowly by building the foundations with food. This is not like a quick fix lifestyle by any means.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're struggling with chronic illnesses, I mean, there's some that I don't want to say is lifelong because I feel like you can heal pretty much everything. But like when you have hormonal imbalances or, stuff like PCOS, I know you struggle with that. These are things that unfortunately just need to be worked with on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I think we live in a society where everything is so fast paced, right? And we've forgotten the way that our bodies were actually developed to live. Everyone says this, but like we have a millions-year-old brain and we have a very modern, brand new, fast paced society. And a lot of the chronic conditions that we have is actually just our bodies, which are built to adapt and are built to like live in these extreme environments, are all of a sudden cushioned and expected to work really mentally and really stressfully, but we're not working physically and we're not out in fields and we're just bombarded by completely different environments than we've been able to adapt to in a certain amount of time. So I think that's where a lot of our chronic conditions really are like rooted in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, a huge part of nutrition is changing that environment by becoming aware of like what our actual environment is internally and externally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, we're also inundated by all kinds of chemicals and pesticides and antibiotics and like the food that we eat. And like, it never ends. The list is just very long.
One of my favorite things is looking at what even the organic foods that we're eating nowadays looked like 100 years ago, even, right? Our foods are fatter. Our foods are, larger in size. They're higher in carbohydrate. They're built to grow and grow in abundance. Whereas back in the day, we were foraging for these like skinny, fibrous, like very low carbohydrate fruits. And we were killing animals for meat. And food just looked a lot different. So I think nowadays the general thing is like, oh, just eat your fruits and vegetables. But our fruits and vegetables do not look like our body recognizes food to look like, even since our grandparents' age.
Yeah. Oh my God, I saw like a meme or something on Instagram, and it was showing the average size of a chicken back in like the 50s to what they look like now.
Yeah.
Like that shit is wild. Like they're about 3 times the size. They're like Terminator chickens.
Absolutely. And they're like, they can barely walk.
Yeah.
They're like chunky, they're bottom heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're growing things with really high protein. And I'm sure we're going to touch on that a little bit more when we talk about gluten. But we're growing our food for money. We're not growing our food for nutrition anymore.
I know. That's really unfortunate. I mean, some of the adaptations have been helpful.
It's really good not to starve to death.
For sure. Yeah. And, the things now are like easier to pick and harvest and all of those things, which can be good. But also, we've created frankenfood in a lot of senses. And that's wreaking havoc on our health.
Yeah. And it's making it really hard to decipher what's healthy for us, and what's not. And what's science and what's, propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we can touch on that a little bit because there are so many different diets out there. I know I have done like every diet under the sun. I don't really do anything super strict anymore. And I actually will attribute the keto diet to being helpful for me only because it allowed me to discover that I had a severe gluten intolerance, which was making me crazy. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later.
Oh, yeah.
But an elimination diet really, it was essentially an elimination diet, and it allowed me to pinpoint something that was really harming my body. But yeah, like there's so much out there. So when you're working with a client, like, do you ever prescribe any of those types of diets, or what do you usually do?
So I like to take bits and pieces of it. Like, for example, let's take the ketogenic diet because I think it's really prominent right now. And there are a lot of ways that people are getting benefit. And the reason they're getting benefit is typically in our standard American diet, people are eating too little fat to like sustain hormone health, to sustain brain health. They're eating too little protein to build the neurotransmitters that we need to have like a healthy brain and to have a healthy gut. And we're eating too many processed foods. So you throw in something like the ketogenic diet. And this was a scientifically designed diet to help control neurological conditions like seizures, as I'm sure many people have heard of. So it was used for this very specific condition. And then we've taken it and been like, I can lose weight, right? And that's all anyone cares about nowadays. Like, unless you're really into it and you're like, I want to heal my mental health, I want to get ahead with, living a vital life, you almost have to crash and burn a few times before that becomes your goal, right? But, they're like, okay, we can lose weight on this diet. And that's all anyone cares about, right? So they get on it. And what I notice from people is, first off, they're balancing their blood sugar for the first time in their life. So we're going to get into blood sugar like a lot more later. So they're noticing the benefits from that. They're getting the building blocks for the neurotransmitters, like what our brain actually needs to feel the way you want to feel, right? Like, none of us want to walk around feeling unmotivated and lazy and tired. Like, that's not the goal. The goal is to feel motivated and happy, and having those neurotransmitters means you have to have the building blocks to build them. You're also getting typically a little bit more whole food. You're not going on the keto diet for the most part. I think there are products that you can just like eat from bars and eat keto, but you're typically including more whole foods and more foods that look like actual foods, right? So you get all these things, and all of a sudden people feel really good on this ketogenic diet, especially for the first like 2 or 3 months, right? They're like, okay, I can do this. This is great. And then what you start noticing is broken nails and your hair starting to fall out. And all of a sudden you're maybe not losing as much weight as you were kind of hoping to. Maybe your energy starts to slump. Maybe you're like not actually able to push at the gym. And what's happening is, first of all, the ketogenic diet is not specifically catered to the person. Whereas in like a scientific setting, you'd be looking at the person, you'd be looking at their energy output, you'd be looking at their sleep, you'd be looking at very different factors. The other thing is, even in the scientific research of the ketogenic diet, it was not a long-term diet. They were doing it in cycles, right? So what's happening with a lot of people is that with that specific diet, they're not getting enough carbohydrate to sustain their hormones, especially for women. And so you start to see thyroids go out, and then all of a sudden keto is the only way they could lose weight because they've gone and like screwed up their whole hormonal cycle, and your body is going, I am in danger. I don't have enough food. And you go into survival mode, right? So when I'm working with clients, I'll use bits and pieces from those diets. Often the most common that you'll see is check out ketogenic fat bombs on Pinterest, right? It's a good way to get healthy meals. But as far as these diets go, I don't think that's the place of a nutritional practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
I think our place is to be working with our client, not just in finding the right diet, but in teaching them how to respond to what their body is asking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what I really loved about working with you, and something that I'm doing more intuitively now for myself.
Yeah.
Like actually today I noticed, so I got up early this morning and I went for a hike, and I'm also starting, it's just been a few months since I've had a real cycle for, my God, most of my life, because I've been on all of these different medications and things in order to keep myself from breaking out, or, control my blood pressure for a little while. And the previous episode that just came out talks about how I got off of all of those medications recently, but it has still been a fairly recent journey for me. So I'm watching my energy and stuff, because I noticed I'm like hiking up this hill and I don't really have a whole lot of energy that I usually do. And I'm like, okay, so there's something there. And then when I came home, I also noticed that I started to get quite a bit of inflammation. So I'm thinking about, okay, so what did I eat this morning? Then something came to me and I was like, am I hydrated enough? And I pounded a whole bunch of water. And then I literally just felt the inflammation go away. And I was like, whoa.
Minerals are incredible.
Yeah. Well, and just but it was cool how that just kind of intuitively came up. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. If you just listen to your body, it will tell you what it needs. And I wasn't feeling very thirsty, but I was kind of walking around being like, I want something, but I don't know what. I want something, but I don't know what. And I'm sure this happens to a lot of people. Sometimes you feel like you need something, but you don't know what it is.
Absolutely.
And for me, that was hydration today.
Yeah.
Felt way better.
Well, and I think kind of the progression that I see a lot of time working with clients is you walk in the door and you've never thought intuitively, what does my body need? They've thought you need a diet, or you need this, or you need that. And then they try and force themselves into the box, right? And then you start asking questions, and then it becomes more and more natural. But what you're talking about is through months of work, you built an intuition. Whereas a lot of times I'm seeing a lot of intuitive eating on the internet right now. And long term, I'm really game for intuitive. But when we've grown up in a society where we're told what to eat, we're told what's healthy, we're told fit this diet, do this exercise, do this, do this, do this. And if you're not doing it, then you're not going to get the gains. If you go on social media, people are hardcore. If you don't do this, you're not going to get here. And we actually don't have an intuition around food the same way that our grandparents did. We're not walking around going, this herb makes me feel this way, this herb makes me feel this way, right? Actually, one of the books I read in nutrition school was really cool. It was talking about having these relationships with food, and people would go out and for 3 days they would only eat kale, for example, or they'd only eat a specific food, and they'd create a relationship. This is what my body feels like initially on this food, when it's mixed with other things, when it's this or that. Because one of the things that we've talked about a lot is when you eat, for example, watermelon on its own on an empty stomach, that might upset your stomach. Is watermelon bad? No, but does it maybe need to come after protein and fat? For some people, yes. We have to build relationships and context around our food so that we actually understand. And then with that, we have the intuition. But it takes a lot of practice. And it takes that curiosity to actually start to build and mentally categorize what's going on.
Yeah, I know that's a concept in herbalism as well, just creating a relationship with the plants. And I feel so sad that we don't live like that anymore. We just have so many choices, and just, modern life makes it darn near impossible to do that. And we get conditioned to live such a fast-paced life that even if we did have the opportunity, it's you get bored.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we can go back to that.
It's true. Well, and we're, you and I, we love food, right? In our day-to-day life, we love food. I love getting Italian olive oil from Valvaroso, and I'm not going to find olives and juice the olive. Well, I guess I don't even know how olive oil is made, but we're not gonna go and go through all these processes for the foods that we love. But if we were living in our environment, we would have so much less choice. And you can build a different relationship with it, as well as the foods. You're also going to notice, we had a really rainy season. We've got lots of luscious vegetables. They're not as fibrous and small. As we learned with the garden, if you don't water it as consistently, you're not going to get as much juicy vegetables. So the weather impacts our food all of these different things. And you're right. Like, I don't think there's a way to go back, but I think we can be more intentional about those relationships and just thinking about them like relationships.
For sure. Okay. Well, I want to move ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
And start talking about blood sugar, because this is something that was pretty game changing for me. And I feel like it's going to be the next hot topics. You know how like everybody's starting to get on like the gut health bandwagon, which still I think everybody needs to know about. And so we're going to talk about that again here.
The two are so interrelated.
Oh, I didn't know that. So, okay, we're going to get into that. But yeah, so blood sugar. So when it goes wrong, so blood sugar issues, let's put it this way. What is a blood sugar issue? What's the difference between that and like diabetes?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with something called insulin resistance. About 80% of Americans, as far as my last Google, it sounds like it's going up since COVID.
I heard 90.
Yeah, so the last I saw, you guys can look this up for your own information, but especially since COVID, it has skyrocketed, something called insulin resistance. So our blood sugar is moderated by something called insulin. Everyone kind of knows blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up. Insulin helps our body to put away the sugar either by being used by our muscles or by being stored as glycogen. So insulin is constantly responding to the food that we eat. Mm-hmm. If we have a slower input of sugar, we have a slower increase of insulin. The sugar specifically and insulin match pretty easily. If we're eating a lot of sugar, we're having to output a lot of insulin. This is a hormone that our body has to build, right? And all of the receptors in our body have to receive it for it to all go well. If we're constantly skyrocketing insulin and then dropping our blood sugar, our cells can become almost a little bit like immune. Kind of like if you get notifications constantly, you're like, oh. And then you're like, oh, fuck it. It's just my clock. It's just this. You know, you start to like stop caring. The cells in our bodies kind of do the same thing. They're either like congested with too much or they just get a little bit unsensitized, right? So we call that insulin resistance. So what that means is our body has to pump out more insulin. So that insulin resistance is when our body is letting our blood sugar get too high and we're not responding well enough to the insulin. So our body has to overpump that. So that phase is insulin resistance. When it turns into diabetes is when our body's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm not going to pump out as much insulin. So first you go into type 2 diabetes, which is when you're just like not producing enough insulin and you have to really monitor your blood sugar. And then when you become insulin dependent is when your body like really gives up. It's like, you know what? I gave you the warning signs and then you really start to lose it. So I like to talk about what insulin resistance feels like because it creates a connection, right? You're like, oh, I got my like blood tests back. And actually a lot of blood tests aren't going to cover this. You have to do a glucose test where you basically drink syrup and the doctor's not going to give that to you unless something's really wrong. So insulin resistance a lot of times is going to look like waking up at 3 a.m., going pee all the time, energy slumps specifically around like 3 or 4 p.m. A lot of times you're going to finish the day like around 4 or 5, even 6, depending on your work schedule, feeling absolutely crashed. And then by the time it's time for bed, you're going to be energized and you're not going to be able to go to sleep.
But wait, isn't this what people always say or naturopaths always say is adrenal fatigue?
Very similar. So one can lead to the other and it kind of goes both ways. So what's happening is insulin and cortisol, which is what's being produced by your adrenals, they have an interconnected relationship. So as insulin goes up, blood sugar goes down. And as soon as blood sugar like crashes to a certain point, cortisol goes up and cortisol says, hi, I'm here. We're in danger. I'm hungry. And that's also what's going to wake you up in the middle of the night. So if we're constantly riding this roller coaster, cortisol goes out at the same rate that insulin is going out. So you will end up in a state of adrenal fatigue. So personally, if we're addressing the adrenals, I think it's not going to get very far unless you're also addressing your blood sugar.
Yep.
Very important that the two are interconnected. So as we're going through life, we're riding this insulin roller coaster, not just insulin, but blood sugar roller coaster. And a couple of the reasons that we have insulin is because as our blood sugar skyrockets, it's acidic in our blood. So it can actually start to damage the arteries and the veins in our body. So that's why our body's like, okay, let's get that down, right? But if we're constantly riding that, we're creating damage and like rips and tears in the blood, but we're also feeding bacteria. So when we're constantly raising our blood sugar, we're also raising the amount of sugar available for the bacteria in our small intestines and for like our eyes and our skin and our scalp and our vaginal canal, like all of these things have the same response to blood sugar. So some of the other things you'll notice is people who are really severe in insulin resistance will have dark circles around their neck or around their eyes. They'll have skin tags, they'll have itchy scalps or like dandruff. And part of the reason that's happening is there's a really advantageous fungal yeast called Candida, which I'm sure most people have heard of at this point. And when our blood sugar is constantly going up and down, Candida can like hitch a ride and it goes systemic. And at that point, it's in kind of a fungal state. And then it'll start to give you a little bit of dandruff, or it'll start to give you foot conditions where you're getting like peeling, or you're getting like funky textures on different parts of your skin. What that's telling you is something is kind of imbalanced in your body. And we're not, as a society, like looking at that as a systemic thing. We're like, oh, I just need to grab some foot cream, or oh, I just need to like do this or that. But a lot of times it's coming back to insulin resistance. And as far as I last checked, I don't think we have a single chronic condition that has not been related back to insulin resistance. This is for women and men.
Okay, so this is wild. So we're talking about 90% of, well, let's just call it North America.
Yeah.
That's like everybody. So like if you're listening or watching this right now, you're probably being affected.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. So if you're wondering why you feel like shit, well, and here's the thing too, right? So Maddie listed off a few symptoms, but here's how it showed up for me. Now, most of my anxiety and stuff was dealt with when I eliminated gluten, which we're going to get to again here still. But I still would get like these weird little pangs. It felt very irrational. It would kind of come out of nowhere. And I never really felt like I would get very hangry or anything like that. I didn't relate any of this to food. I would just have days where I felt inflamed.
Yeah.
Like I would be kind of achy and really exhausted, or I would just have like a bunch of irrational anxiety for no reason. And I took some advice from Kayla Betts, who is going to come on the podcast as well. And it was funny. So Maddie already told me, I was working with Maddie for a little bit, and she was like, Krysta, I think you have something going on with your blood sugar. And I was like, weird. I don't know. And and, she's trying to give me some advice or whatever. And I started working with Kaler, and we were doing business coaching, but he's like, he's really into nutrition and stuff too. And he does, fabulous stuff for folks. But he was like, Krysta, I'm doing this meat and fruit diet. And so just try doing this. He's like, I swear to God, it's going to make you feel a lot better. And so I followed his advice. However, I didn't do it right. So, on our call, he was mentioning, he was like, yeah, like I really like to have mango and, dates and all these things. And I was like, wait, shit, like I never eat fruit. Like I try not to eat a lot of sugar and carbs and stuff, because for me, I just don't feel very good when I do. I can have fruit. So I was like, fuck yeah. And I went and bought like a whole bunch of dates and like, fruit and whatever. But I think what he meant was the majority of the fruit he was eating were things like cucumber and tomato and olives, because those are fruit as well. So literally day one, I'm eating all this nice steak and whatever, and I'm sending him pictures of it. I was like, like, look how nice this is. Aren't you jealous? And then I'm like downing all this fruit, and I ate a fuck ton of dates. And by, 8 p.m., I ended up with probably the closest thing that I've had to a panic attack in a very long time. And I'm like in the bathtub having like a full-blown mental breakdown, being like, what is happening? Like my anxiety was off the chart. And so I'm like crying, and like, I don't know how many times I've like messaged Maddie from the bathtub being like, having a meltdown, what's wrong with me? Because as somebody with chronic illness, this is, I am significantly feeling much better than I used to, but you still have days, right? You still have days. So she's a great responder, and I can message her about whatever. And she's like, dude, what did you eat today? We list all the things. And she's like, okay, you need to like work on this. So I messaged her, and she's like, this is what blood sugar issues look like. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what this feels like. So there's like a whole range of symptoms, right? But it's swinging. Like if you feel like you're kind of swinging back and forth throughout the day, which we all are, right? Like we're all busy, we're stressed out, we're just grabbing something on the go, and we're all suffering with it. But the good news is that there's some ways to combat it.
Absolutely. So I just want to say two things before we get into how to combat it. The first is sometimes we need those moments. That's how you build intuition. Because before that, I feel like we were kind of like edging around it. And I was like, I think at one point I was like, you should just go eat a Slurpee. Like, just have that moment, right? Like, feel sick, make yourself sick so that you know. Because then when you start to swing, you are able to crash a little bit quicker, right?
Yeah.
So those moments we have to be so grateful for because they're terrible and we hate them. We don't want to be in them.
Yeah.
And the next 2 or 3 days can take time to actually start to rebalance and like find homeostasis again. But we got to be grateful for those moments. And if you have them, start to recognize, because you don't want to have to like come and see someone and have another one. Like, start to like look back, have a journal, be like, what is going on with my body? And just get really, really curious. The other thing I wanted to touch on is we just talked about fruit a whole bunch. And this is like the hot debate of the moment. Should we be eating fruit? The answer is probably yes. But fruit is a little bit different than just your standard sugar. There's something called fructose, which is present in fruit. Fucking fructose. The reason we're saying fucking fructose is not because fruit is evil. Fruit is not evil. Fruit did nothing to us. But fructose is actually processed through our liver. So it's not moderated by insulin. So sugar in general, like, doesn't really have a good top off point as far as our body. If we eat too much protein, you feel heavy, you feel full. Your body has ways of moderating all kinds of nutrients. But because back in the day, the fruit was fibrous and it was low carbohydrate, we had such low carbohydrate diets, our body was like, okay, if we can get quick carbohydrates, that's the thing we want. So you keep eating it. And fructose actually in some studies has been shown not only to not moderate appetite, but to convince the body that you're more hungry. So that's fructose on its own. The only time you're finding fructose on its own is in processed foods. So when we talk about fructose, don't just think about fruit. It's really important that people understand that when you're seeing like glucose fructose syrup, or you're seeing fructose just straight up on labels, that's what's happening. And part of the reason that they use that is because in studies, it's shown that you actually increase your appetite with fructose.
Okay, so is this one of those things that those sneaky motherfuckers do at companies to like put something in food to make you want to eat more of it?
I have not worked at those companies, but I think so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've watched the documentaries and, you know, the whole thing with MSG and whatever. It's like something that makes it more crave-worthy and you want to keep eating more of it.
Absolutely.
Shit's evil.
Shit's a little bit evil. With fruit, we are eating fruit that's a little bit bigger, a little bit more tropical, for example. Like the fact that in the middle of winter, this example happened in the winter time. The fact that we have access to moundfuls of medjool dates or fresh ripe mango, it's not natural. So while all of those electrolytes and water and fiber that are in the vegetable are really good in the summer after you've been out in the sun all day and you might need a little bit more of that, that's where it's grown, right? Like tropical fruits grow in tropical climates. So we're eating them almost in the wrong climate.
Yeah.
But if you're on a gut healing diet, or if you are working with a practitioner, there are times where it's appropriate to limit fruit. The other thing is, back in the day, fruit was a lot more fibrous. It was a lot less sweet. I keep repeating it, but it's so important to remember that it's not healthy foods or good or bad. It's context, right? So if we're going to be eating food like that, it's important that we're doing some of the tips that we're just going to talk about in a second here to moderate blood sugar and to just be aware of that and be aware of how you feel after fruit. Because, and I think kids are the big ones suffering from this. Moms are taught, eat healthy food, eat whole foods, do Whole30, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes kids will be hungry and what they'll need is protein and fiber and like real food. And what they'll be given is oranges and a banana. Right. So if you're,
oh my God, like chocolate milk, chocolate oat milk.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. These foods
just
that are
pure sugar.
And they're touted as healthy. But if the child is hungry for real food, you've just put glucose into an empty stomach, right? There's nothing to moderate it. There's nothing even to buffer the stomach from just absorbing the sugar right away, right?
Yeah.
So the higher the spike, the more insulin you're going to get, the harder the crash. So you get those kids who are like, and then they're out. Or they're really cranky because then all of a sudden they're in a blood sugar crash and they're asking for more snacks. I actually used to nanny. This is a bit of an aside, but I would nanny for this family that they tried really hard to eat healthy. And it was, really good to work with them. And we had some conversations. But at one point I was like really hungry, and usually I brought my lunches. So I snacked on some of the kids like dry fruit. And then I was like really hungry. So I like reached for some gluten-free crackers that were available. And just the entire day I was like hungry and I was unsatiated and I was ungrounded. I was really like up in my head. And
I call it like very vata, like in Ayurveda, it's like a lot of air, can feel like anxiety or whatever. And I'm just like, and it's like, and I feel like I need something heavy to like bring me down.
And we're adults. Like I'm talking specifically about children's food, and it's so hard to watch how heavily these things are marketed. But kids are the ones who are the victim because they don't have the words to explain. And we don't even have the words, right? No. How long does it take to figure out, oh, this constant anxiety or depression or things that I'm having actually are related to the way that I'm creating an environment in my body? So yeah, it can affect us in so many different ways. And truly, I think it shows up in our personalities. What can we do to buffer blood sugar? Yeah. We'll go back to the start.
I want to take a quick second to let you guys know about the other side of Wild Remedies, our incredible wellness potions. We recently launched a collection of functional magic lattes crafted with love and intention to help you look and feel your best. We currently have 3 delicious products to nourish you from the inside out. Strawberry Rose is our beauty potion, crafted with ceramicides and vitamin C to help hydrate and plump your skin from within. Spiced Chocolate is our immunity blend, featuring wild Siberian chaga mushroom with a sophisticated spicy twist to support your immune system. And finally, Almond Lavender Dream, a literal chill pill in a cup, with potent relaxation herbs and delicate notes of amaretto and vanilla to help you unwind. At Wild Remedies, our goal is to bring you the best of nature for the betterment of humanity.
The first thing is eating enough protein. That's going to be a really big one. First thing in the morning, especially for us women. Men tend to, in studies, do better fasting in the morning. I'm going to let you go first.
Well, I just want to interject because I want to know what your thoughts are in terms of quality protein, right? So like we have a lot of folks that are probably on different diets. You know, there's some people who are vegetarian and vegan. Maddie and I both aren't. We're meat eaters. Well, you were vegan for a while.
I was before nutrition school.
Yeah.
I like to remind people of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was vegetarian for about 4 years as well, but we both eat meat now.
We do.
And why do we do that?
Well, one of the main reasons we do that is because meat is like the most whole form of protein. It's the most direct source. It's the least processed. And a lot of times you're getting the full range of amino acids. And the cool thing about animals is like not just in protein, but in all of the nutrients, the animal has already broken it down into a workable form. So when you're eating a carrot, you're not getting vitamin A, you're getting beta carotene. And the expectation is that the bacteria and the enzymes in your stomach are then going to transfer it into a vitamin A. So you require a lot more energy to turn vitamins from a carrot into a usable form of vitamin for your body. Whereas when you eat meat, it's the exact amount in the exact, like it's the right amount for your body. The other thing is right now we've got like whey protein, we've got protein powders, we've got every kind of vegan, hydrolyzed, crazy it is. And what I like to remind people is, I mean, watch the factory videos. Like it's not even moral. It's just, what do you want your food to look like? So protein is what we build the neurotransmitters for our brain with. And do you want to be building your brain with something that maybe doesn't quite fit? So the way that I like to explain this is like chemistry is a lot like shapes as far as nutrition. So your body has like a receptor, and the receptor might look like this. And if the protein is whole, it's going to, fit in the receptor that we've built over ages and ages of eating food, right? And if you take a protein and you denatured it by cooking it and then processing it and then like adding oils and things like that, it might look like this. And while it's technically still a protein, it's been changed chemically and it doesn't fit the receptor the right way, right? And so you start to have these like very mild symptoms. Sometimes it can be bigger for people like us who are a little bit more sensitive, and it can create inflammation and it can create poor quality neurotransmitters, or fat is a really good example. It creates poor quality hormones. And then those continue to circulate throughout your body. So quality is really important, not just because we're adding pesticides and things like that, but also because the heat that we're using is denaturing protein. It's denaturing the fat that we're using. It goes a little bit rancid a lot of times, especially if you're reusing it, like deep frying and things like that. So that quality is important, not just to not get chemicals in, which I think we focus on a lot of times, but it's also important to build our body and to build literally our experience, because our brain is how we're experiencing the world. So you want that to be really high quality, and meat is one of those ways they can go pretty close to direct to the source.
Yeah. And just to kind of reiterate, like the type of meat that Maddie and I eat is grass fed. It's from local farms,
Yeah.
like living in the Okanagan where we do here, we're really fortunate that we have a lot of local food producers.
Yeah.
I literally I get my eggs across the street. I've started riding my bike over there and I
Yeah.
just go and get my eggs there, which is really fabulous. I know not everybody has the opportunity to do that, but if you are going to eat animal-based products, it's really important to make sure that it is ethical. I completely understand. I mean, I was a very righteous vegetarian.
Yep.
For 4 years. I was like, oh my God, you eat animals, you're an absolute monster. How dare you? Da 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 da. So I've been there and I get that. However, and for me, actually, another really big part of that was about climate change. I was very stressed out about that. And all of the information that I was provided at that time was essentially cow farts are killing everybody. And that is the reason that we're all dying. I mean, but that information is everywhere right now, right?
I know. I went down the same rabbit hole. I drank that Kool-Aid. I know.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is new information out right now, and we won't get too much into it. But one thing that I'm quite passionate about is regenerative farming. If anybody out there is listening and is interested in watching a documentary called Kiss the Ground, it is a fabulous explanation about what regenerative farming is and how it is actually probably our only hope in reversing climate change. And it's extremely holistic. And it's really about just nourishing the relationship between animal husbandry and agriculture and, removing monocrops. And this in turn creates healthy soil and allows all of the things that we were putting into the environment to be sequestered back down into
Absolutely.
the earth.
Well, and removing the need for fertilizers and pesticides and things like that, but actually using the animal's waste, right?
Yeah.
Another important thing on that is just making sure your animals are eating biologically appropriate food, right?
And are not shot up with tons of antibiotics and hormones.
Yeah, because
that'll mess with your guts.
We're living in a money food system, not a nourishment food system. And a lot of times cows are given corn and their feed actually needs to be they're getting sick, so they have to pump them full of hormones and pump them full of things. And if you Google it, there's even cows that have holes in their stomach so that you can push it along because they're made to eat grass and be out in the sunshine. So when we're talking
so people are putting holes in cows on purpose to put their physical hands in and
push nutrients down the stomach line. It's Google it. It's horrific. We'll look it up after this. It's disgusting. It's so bad. So we're not talking about grocery store meat. We order from the same company. I do occasionally get New Zealand grass-fed beef. We like to call it the homeschooled beef because they don't use as many pesticides in New Zealand. And one of the big differences is the taste. You can taste the one that we were ordering from before. It tastes like a different kind of cow, and it's the hairy ones.
Yeah,
they're beautiful.
I had that one. That was good.
Yeah, and the New Zealand beef tastes a little bit different, but you've got yellow fat. It's not white. It doesn't taste the same as regular grocery store beef. So it is quality hugely important. And you're not going to get the same nutrients. We just talked about the animal converting all these nutrients. If you put that animal into a dark cage and you feed it the wrong food and then expect it to thrive, it's not an animal that you really want to be eating. So quality is really important. We didn't go from vegan to pro chicken nuggies. But protein is really important. So let's finally get to balancing blood sugar.
Yes.
Getting enough protein is really important. That's going to start, especially if you do it first thing in the day, it's going to start you off with an adequate amount of energy.
How much protein?
I used to be one of those 10 to 15 grams girls, back in the day when we were vegan, at least, it was you don't need as much protein as people are saying, blah, blah, blah. I've actually run from 20 to 25, sometimes even 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning. It is a lot of protein. It doesn't all have to come from meat. We've talked about eggs, beans. There's lots of ways to get it and mix it all up.
Well, and I use a protein powder that's vegan, but it's there's not a lot of junk in it. There's no seed oils and all of that stuff. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an animal protein.
Well, and I believe the one you're using is also locally made.
Yeah.
No, it's really cool. Protein powder is okay for those things. That's going to start you off with an adequate amount of energy. But also protein takes a little while to digest. So when you're eating protein, and with some of my clients will work on practices to increase this, but you're increasing your stomach acid. Protein is digested in the stomach. So all of the acids in your stomach will also help to buffer as you eat carbohydrates later in the day. The other important thing about that is we need those stomach acids to make sure that the bacteria in our gut are going to be healthy. The next thing is dressing up your carbohydrates. So we say don't eat naked carbohydrates. Don't just eat a banana, especially if you're insulin resistant. While some people might be able to get away with that, especially our athletic friends, they've got more muscle, they've got more activity throughout the day, they can use that energy. But if you're not able to use it quickly, typically within a half an hour of eating the food, it's just going to get stored away, right? Or it's going to raise your blood sugar and you're not going to have anywhere to use it. So making sure we don't eat them naked, dress it up with protein and fat. For something like an apple, eating a lot of almond butter with it is going to be a great way to kind of balance it out. Or fiber. So you can eat a little salad and then have your apple. Or if you're going to have a sweet treat, eating it after a balanced dinner. Another thing that helps with that, like we just talked about, is stomach acid, is apple cider vinegar. The acetic acid in the apple cider vinegar can help to moderate how much your blood sugar fluctuates throughout the meal. Oh, use the energy. Like the athletes, if you have one of those sweet treats, you're at a wedding or something, for example, using that energy right away is really important for like making sure you don't crash and feel like shit later. I would love to segue into how this affects our blood sugar or our gut bacteria since the two are connected. So we're talking about raising that blood sugar, right? If you raise your blood sugar and you're constantly up and down like this, the bacteria that are going to survive are the ones that are being fed. So one of our favorites to talk about is that candida, right? This is a really advantageous bacteria. So even if you're feeding it kind of inconsistently, it takes up real estate. A little bit like Kelowna, for example. Now you kind of have to be super rich to own land in Kelowna, right? The candida are like the rich guys. If you create really fertile land and there's enough room for everyone, good bacteria will start to win out if you're not eating as much sugar and you're starting to keep it balanced. It's not even about the amount of sugar, but the way that you're eating the sugar. The good bacteria will be able to get more real estate. But if you're constantly spiking that, you're feeding the candida. The good bacteria are not thriving on sugar or carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, things like that. So that candida goes in. And then we talked about leaky gut. So bacteria that are pathogenic, they've got like their little body like this, and they actually have raincoats that make them really resilient to antimicrobial, like oregano and stuff like that, right? You have to use it for a long time to actually break through those umbrellas. So they've got a protection on top, they got their little body, and then they grow legs into your stomach lining, which is only about 1 cell thick. So they grow these little legs, and then they're in a live and death cycle as well as anything else. So every time you feed them, you're getting more and more of them, and they're growing their little holes, they're building their little homes in their roots, and then they die, or you do a cleanse and you start to like kill them off a little bit. And what you're left with is these tiny microscopic holes in your stomach lining and in your small intestines. And as you eat food, and a lot of times in these cases, we're eating stressed out, we're not chewing fully, proteins can start to get through those holes. And that's when we start to get leaky gut. You're starting to build an inflammatory or an even allergic reaction to the proteins that are making their way through the stomach lining and into your bloodstream. Because usually you digest that, right? And the bacteria actually digests it into a form that it can then go through your body, and it's been fully digested and everything's hunky-dory. So every time we're spiking our blood sugar like that, we're like giving money we're like giving money to the real estate people that are just buying up all the land, and they're creating an environment where only those really advantageous people can thrive.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about another tip when it comes to blood sugar. And so actually you introduced me to the Glucose Goddess.
She's amazing.
Yeah, on Instagram. And I listened to a podcast from her the other day, and I found that this was really, really helpful. And I know that you concur with all this. But before having a meal, have a shot of apple cider vinegar, like I think a tablespoon, mixed in water.
Mixed in water.
Yeah.
It's not a competition.
Yeah, you don't want to like fuck up your teeth.
Yeah.
So you have a bit of apple cider vinegar before you have a meal. You eat veggies first.
Yep.
Okay. So leafy greens, well, pretty much anything.
Anything
right?
fibrous, yeah.
Anything fibrous. Then you have your protein.
Or fat.
Or fat. Well,
and
yeah.
fat, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times they're together.
Yeah. And then if you're having a carb or a starch, have that at the end. And those things in combination. And this is actually like, it sounds easy, but it can be kind of difficult. Like for me, when I eat, I'm like, oh, I want a little bit of this. And then I want a little bit of this. And I want to, so it is like actually a practice for me to be like, no, salad first, then protein, then potatoes or whatever it is that you're having at the end. But this essentially helps you from having like these major swings and things. And if you get your blood sugar under control, you know, you can start to naturally lose weight and, you know, not be a complete fucking basket case during the day, or like have massive crashes after you eat. You know how like people call it, they're like, oh my God, I'm having like a carb coma.
Yeah.
Or whatever, because they ate lunch. And I get that. Like, I actually rarely do eat carbs for the first 2/3 of my day. I like to keep it to the evening because I do notice that, you know, I will feel a little bit more sluggish. Again, if you are eating things in the way that I just had mentioned, it will help with, you know, having less of a crash afterwards. But it's a little bit of a heavier meal, right? So your body's digesting it, and that requires energy as well. So I like to keep my heavier meals a little bit later in the day.
Absolutely.
Which the Europeans would probably argue with, because I know that they generally have their biggest meal at lunch, which is probably better for us. But the way that we operate in our North American, we got a lot of shit to do.
We got priorities. We got to work.
You know, I got stuff to do. I can't have a fucking siesta at 1 every day. That'd be really dope, but that's just not how it works here. But yeah, I mean, that has definitely made a big difference for me. I haven't had like a meltdown in the bathtub in a long time. So yeah, woo.
Love that. Well, and part of the reason that works is because protein and fat take longer to digest. So they're actually taking up that real estate in your gut. So carbohydrates, typically you actually are starting to digest them in your mouth. You get like 20% of your carbohydrate as you're chewing. So it can go right through that epithelial layer, like of your stomach. So when you eat that protein and fat first, not only are you getting like a more consistent energy, but you're preventing that sugar from immediately being absorbed through that stomach lining. So you're literally just covering it. Like, if we start to think of the spaces inside of us a little bit differently, it starts to kind of make sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
It's a really important one. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So again, this is something that I alluded to on, I think it's the podcast previous to this, when I talk about how I went from 8 medications to 0. But gut health being one of the most important epiphanies that I've ever had in my life, like literally changed my life and took me from being bedridden with, oh my God, just like the most insane depression and anxiety to being a completely different person in a short period of time. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the episode, but I was doing a ketogenic diet for a little bit. And then I stopped because when you're doing extremely restrictive diets, it makes you go crazy after a while. And of course I was doing it to lose weight, and I wasn't losing weight. And even though I was being very strict. So I quit, and then I ate a whole bunch of stuff that I normally don't eat, but I was like, let's have some bread and some breakfast cereal, like very odd things for me to eat. Actually, that's not what I normally eat.
Truly depression foods.
Yeah. Oh my God. And then I ended up being completely crippled. And that's when I learned about how gut health and leaky gut in particular can create all kinds of psychological issues. And for me, what that felt like was severe anxiety and depression, but also like pain all over my body. And I think I did talk about this in that last episode, where when I was depressed, quote unquote depressed, it felt like I had a fever.
Yeah.
Right. And my medical doctors would be like, oh, so you have pain with your depression? Well, that means that you're just super, 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 super depressed. And here's like a shit ton of more antidepressants to go on. Right. Yeah. And I remember listening to commercials, you know, on TV being like, do you have pain with your depression? Well, that must mean that this, and here's the drug that you need.
Yeah.
Well, that's not actually what's happening. So when you have leaky gut, well, you explain it. You're the expert.
So I don't even think you need to have leaky gut to have that experience. So one of the reasons gluten specifically is doing that is when our body doesn't actually fully break down gluten, it basically turns into an opiate in your body. It's in dairy. It's casomorphin. I can't remember exactly what it's called for gluten, but it's a very similar thing. Our body doesn't break it all the way down. And so we get an opiate effect from the gluten. So we get kind of hooked, right? You get a little bit of like a drug addict.
And same with cheese.
Yeah, casomorphin. So it can be a really inflammatory food, even if you're not allergic to it, even if nothing else is going on. One of the reasons that it can be so tricky for our neurotransmitters is we have something called the enteric nervous system. So we started off with the idea that like your nervous system starts in your head, and you've got, you know, like your nervous system through your body and things like that. And it used to be like your brain is all here. And then it was like, oh, neurotransmitters are actually made in our gut. So that's part of how you're thinking. And then they realized like Not only that, but you have a whole nervous system that's paying attention to your gut. That's that enteric nervous system. And that's where some of our intuitions come from, like around food or around all kinds of things, right? More than we've even been able to dive into as far as research goes. But part of the reason you're feeling that depression and you're feeling all those mental things is half of your nervous system in your brain is wired to pay attention to that gut.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other thing that's really tricky with something like gluten and anything that's really gluey, so like oats can be an issue with this one, especially if you're getting like
Really?
quick oats, highly processed. But you've got something called microvilli in your stomach. And they look like little folds, almost like brains, that look tiny little hairs. And those microvilli are how you're picking up your nutrients, right? And you get something really gluey that you've eaten, you probably haven't chewed it very well, and it's not great quality. And you've got all that, plus you've got, it's probably been treated with glyphosate. All these little like hairs that are hanging out in your gut and trying to like get absorb nutrients for you, they get flattened.
Yeah.
And the gluten just goes in and it just like crushes them. And it's like, fuck you. Goes in, wreaks havoc on your gut, right? So not only are you creating inflammation inside of a part of your body that your nervous system is wired to pay attention to, you're giving it inflammation, you're starting to like flatten these microvilli, and you're preventing the absorption of other nutrients. On top of that, a lot of times these gluten-y foods are coming in highly processed carbohydrates. So you're also feeding things like candida and the bacteria that isn't, the bacteria that's going to make you feel really awesome. It's not the ones that you're buying from Nature's Fair to make sure that your gut health is improving. So gluten's doing all those things. Now, I like to touch on why gluten is such a problem nowadays, not only because it's treated with glyphosate and it's monocropped, so you're not getting like the soil richness that you should be getting from a crop like this, but also it's been genetically engineered and sometimes just preference, like they're just growing the crops that grow the most, but we've increased, I can't remember the exact amount, but we've increased the crap load of the protein that makes wheat grow. It makes it produce a lot of food so we can make more money off of it in less time.
Of course.
Yeah. And so what makes things grow big and healthy? It's the protein. So that's gluten. A lot of times you hear people go gluten-free and they don't understand that gluten is the protein from the grain. And so not only do you have all these other problems with it, but it used to be like 2% of the crop, and now I think it's like 40% of the grain. That might not be the right numbers. I'm not best at remembering numbers, but there's just this massive increase in the gluten in the way that we've grown our wheat. So you're starting to go crazy because literally it's almost like if you were to like put a pillow over your face and be like, okay, I can kind of breathe through the pillow. Like I'm not maybe going to die immediately, but it's not awesome, right? You're going to start to panic. Mm-hmm. So if you've got your enteric nervous system happening in your gut, it's a little bit like putting a pillow on all those little microvilli and all the nutrients, and you're like, I'm going to kind of starve you. Mm-hmm. But you're going to feel really full. So you start to feel sweaty. You start to change the bacteria in your gut if you've been eating healthy. So, when you're tricking yourself by having that treat or by indulging or anything like that, you're making all of these changes. And all of those changes are affecting your entire body in a really profound way. I used to get panic attacks, and I thought I was like an anxiety-induced person. At one point, I was actually diagnosed with a panic disorder.
Of course.
And I stopped eating gluten. And like, I get stressed, don't get me wrong, and I'm dramatic when I'm stressed, but I haven't had a panic attack. Mm-hmm. That's not related to food since. Mm-hmm. Not the same can't breathe, like really racing thoughts, like that inability to cope mm-hmm. was very much, at least for my body, related to the
food. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the things that contribute to these issues, right? So we've got gluten. We have antibiotics.
Yeah.
Right. We have antibiotics that are pumped into the animals that we eat.
Yep.
We have glyphosate, which is essentially Roundup, which is on everything.
Almost all of our food. Yep.
Yeah. So what the fuck do we do about this?
So the gut is not just inside the gut. It's also everything that we're interacting with, right? Like we have bacteria all over our skin. We're like never even touching each other. We have so many different layers of organisms. Even the cells that create energy in our body, the mitochondria, are a bacteria that actually got into our cells, and we rely on them for energy. That's how we create ATP and like make our body move. So we're so reliant on these microorganisms. We're trying to kill them in every single way. But healing the gut is not just about eating good foods, although I really like to shout out bone broth in this one. Bone broth can be high histamine, so it's not a cure-all that I think some people may think that it is.
Works for me.
Yeah, works for a lot of people. You're getting glutamine.
Yeah.
You're getting glutamine from it. So that glutamine actually helps to seal the gut lining again. So if you've been doing a cleanse or anything like that, the bone broth and the glutamine are really good for resealing that. It gives you the building blocks to actually create those nutrients that turn into the cell wall, right? Also a really good one for when you get too sore from working out. It's like instant how fast you stop being sore from glutamine. And one of the ways to decrease the histamine in the bone broth is just by not cooking it for as long. Or if you're going to cook it for a long time, when you put it in the fridge, you don't necessarily have to heat it up for as long. Every time you heat it up, you're going to create a little bit more histamine. So if you've got like 2-week-old bone broth that you keep reheating, that tends to be when you start to have histamine. Now, a lot of people aren't histamine intolerant. The occasional person, though, they'll get like a little bit flushed, they'll start to have issues, and they'll be like, bone broth just doesn't work for me. And just call a nutritionist. We kind of understand these things. Bone broth is a really good one. Playing in the dirt and the soil and interacting with our environment is really good. Actually sleeping properly and giving our body all the things that it needs to be in a proper homeostasis. Actually getting adequate sleep can improve your insulin resistance, and it can improve the way that you're like responding to sugar in the moment. You won't be as hungry. There was a study, I think it was about a 30% increase in calories intake when you didn't get enough sleep. Because we just were more hungry. We don't have as much energy. We're not starting off our day as intentionally.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Okay. So let's just reiterate that. So we're not getting enough sleep.
Yep.
So we're tired during the day.
Yep.
And what does our body want to do when it needs energy?
Well, I mean, if you're not going to sleep, you're going to eat.
Yeah.
You're going to, where can I get energy from?
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. It's a big one.
Sleep's important, y'all.
Sleep is important.
Yeah.
And the positive feedback system that's happening also is if you're really imbalanced in your blood sugar, then you're waking up at 3 a.m. and you're not getting adequate sleep.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the roller coaster continues. You keep this positive feedback system going. So you have to break into these cycles. Sometimes a diet is the way, like a healing diet or an intentional time to be like, okay, I'm going to take melatonin for this week. I'm going to work on these things. And then you have to like break that cycle at a certain point and create a new feedback loop, you know, because all the things, they either get worse and worse and worse or better and better and better.
Okay. Well, we've got bone broth. I mean, aloe is also a really good one.
Aloe is amazing. Eating herbs in general, anything that's going to be a little bit, especially if you're in a state where you've got a lot of dysbiosis happening, which is just when you've got a non-favorable balance of bacteria in your gut. Dysbiosis is like a catch-all term for whatever kind you have. When you have that going on, eating things like oregano, using herbs intentionally to kill some of that bacteria is really helpful. I also really like colloidal silver, making sure that you're getting adequate minerals in your water and making sure you're adding salt to lots of things. That will increase the alkalinity, which creates an environment that's harder for pathogenic bacteria to live in. If we're constantly in a more acidic state and we're not eating whole foods, that bacteria, the candida, for example, or the other pathogens that are causing us distress are able to live in that more acidic environment. So minerals can be a really huge asset for that. Getting into sleep, playing outside, energy, like literally the energy that you're carrying throughout the day when you're in a happy mood versus in like a really sad, depressed mood and you're slumping your body. Movement plays such a big role in how our body is reacting, not just because, for example, like when you're sad, you're creating the hormones and the neurotransmitters and all the things to say like, I'm in a slump today. And there's a lot of things you can do to increase your energy without like spiritually bypassing, but being like, okay, we're in, you know, a shitty mood. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to change this thing, right? You're actually changing the environment inside of your body. But when you're in kind of like a lazy, slumpy, sad mood, you go like this and you actually create tension around your stomach. So you're not getting as much blood flow and you're not getting as much nutrients to the gut. And when you're happy and you're sitting upright, right, like body language says a lot. A lot of times you start to relax. I think you and I have had some really fun nights where we do a bunch of mushrooms and I can get away with eating way more crazy food when I'm in that relaxed state and there's less tension around my stomach. There's less tension around my digestive system. All of a sudden you've got more enzymes. You've got more stomach acid. You've got more fluidity in your stomach. Even just the peristalsis, which is like what brings the food down to your bowels and lets you release it, increases when you're in a lighter state and you're able to be more flexible, whether it's walking because you're sad and you need to do something about it, or it's just because you're like, all right, I gotta do something, so I gotta move so that my digestive system can really work. And I think we're sold so many supplements and diets and ways of being that don't include movement as part of gut health and don't include that emotional body as part of gut health. And I think it's a huge mistake.
Yeah. Actually, and a thing that I want to touch on quickly too is, so you mentioned about playing in the dirt.
Yeah.
So we're made out of bacteria and viruses, and having really healthy gut flora is, I mean, it's everything.
It's everything. It's way more than we even know.
Yeah. I mean, these little bugs are what are determining our moods, for goodness sake. Like, it's unfathomable. And unfortunately, over the past few years, we've received a lot of information about sanitizing absolutely everything in our hands all the time. You know, I think now we all recognize that, you know, this affliction that was upon us actually isn't even passed on.
It's not a surface dweller.
No.
It's airborne.
So that was really, really bad advice, among a lot of bad advice that we received. So if you are, you know, in a situation where you are sanitizing quite often, just understand that that is probably going to affect your immune system in a negative way. And I mean, we need bugs, we need dirt, we need
bacteria. Also, when we're sanitizing our hands and you smell that alcohol, your lungs are full of bacteria, and you're also killing everything as it goes in, however much that you're breathing in. Or if you see, like, on planes, a lot of times if you go to Australia, they've got like a little bottle and it's aerosol and you see the white going through.
Oh my God, that stresses me out so bad every time that happens.
Yeah, you've sanitized everything. But if you go outside, lots of studies have shown like having a garden can increase like happiness when you're in depression. And it's the vitamin D of being outside. It's getting your hands in a solid microbiome and actually absorbing it and possibly touching your eyes and your ears and starting to like reseed. Just eat dirt, honestly. Yeah. A spoonful of dirt is going to have more bacteria than an entire bottle of probiotics, and you don't even have to actually eat it. Just interact with it and start to change that microbiome. Give yourself that flora, give yourself that diversity. Eating fiber is another really important one. I think the ketogenic diet, unfortunately, tends to be lower in fiber, but we need both soluble and insoluble fiber, which if you eat vegetables, you're getting an adequate balance. You do need those plants from outside to increase that microflora and to make sure that everything kind of has something to eat.
We forgot about alcohol too, right? You mentioned like breathing in, you know, the fumes from the alcohol and the hand sanitizer, but when we're ingesting alcohol as well. So like, I don't know if you guys know the term hangxiety.
Yeah.
You know, when you have like a big night and then the next day you are, you know, on the verge of a panic attack or like, you know, you feel like shit or whatever, but you have like a lot of irrational anxiety. This is because you've essentially wiped out your gut bacteria.
In large part, the other thing that you're doing when you're drinking like that, you kind of lose your inhibitions and you increase dopamine and you increase oxytocin and you increase all of these neurotransmitters. Over, like, people say stealing happiness from tomorrow, but you kind of literally are taking the amino acids, taking all of the nutrients you would have had to build neurotransmitters tomorrow, and then you're not replenishing them because you're not sleeping properly. Your liver is working through the alcohol. You killed all the bad guys, but you just used up all your dopamine, all of your oxytocin, all of these things. Then you wake up the next morning and you're like, man, I don't feel so good.
Just literally poison myself for 12 hours solid. But
I know, right? Yeah. It's a wild ride what we do, you know? It's alcohol is a tough one. There's a lot more happening with that as well, but it is important if you're drinking alcohol. Like, we use that to sanitize. So think about what that's doing to your gut, and more than we even know.
And moderation, right? It's not like I don't ever drink. I drink significantly less than I used to. I don't actually even really have alcohol in my house. I don't drink, you know, I know there's some people that like to have a glass of wine every single day after work or whatever. And those habits can kind of add up over time. So it's really about considering, is this event worth it?
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, you're going to feel like shit after, you know, you're going to do some damage to your body. And I mean, the social aspects of alcohol, I really love the social aspects of alcohol. I love drinking with friends. You know, it's nice. It gets everybody open and whatever. But you really do, like, at some point, especially if you're dealing with chronic health issues, you need to, you know, take a hard look at your
relationship.
What's your relationship to that thing and adjust accordingly?
And I think it's important too, like we grew up and it's like, you're 18, you can drink, do your thing. And we don't question that relationship. 19 in BC, Alberta. And I moved to Australia when I was 18, so I got to drink early. But all of a sudden it's like, okay, alcohol is part of my life. And I think when we go through cleanses and we go through different times, part of that is also reflecting on like, what are these drugs for me? Cleanses and coffee, like we've got a stimulant there that's literally stimulating you to overproduce different nutrients so that you feel a certain way. And I think there's a lot of benefits to it as well. But we have to look at our relationship with these things because our bodies are made to adapt. We are adaptive creatures. So we're constantly scanning the environment, both internally and externally, and adjusting the way our body expresses itself based on the environment.
Okay, well, we are over time now.
We're so over time.
Yeah, but that was such phenomenal information. And it was a lot, right? So, I mean, this is just the stuff that Maddie and I talk about all the time. And I know it's not, for a lot of people, they're probably like, what the fuck are you guys talking about?
Oh, yeah, it's so much. It's so fast.
It's a lot. Yeah. So if you are feeling not so hot, if you are considering doing another crash diet, you know, you're wanting to change your body physiology and you're exhausted, you've tried all the things. If you're dealing with any sort of health issue that you would like to address naturally, because I mean, it is actually wild what a nutritionist can heal.
It's slower. You have to be ready. You have to be so sick of your shit that you're ready.
It is a slow process, you guys. And I mean, I'm a testament to this. Again, on that last episode, like the 45 minutes of rambling that I did about me getting off of all those prescriptions, that shit took me 30 years. Okay. I'm not saying that if you work with Maddie, it's going to take 30 years for results.
I hope not.
No, like
that
especially
would be so bad.
Even a blood sugar thing. I mean, like that's immediate, right? Yeah. Like you're going to feel better immediately. But if you're wanting to change your body and you're wanting to like get to the root cause of stuff, I mean, and actually a really cool thing about working with Maddie too, she is going to address some emotional things, which is also a really important aspect to healing, which I've mentioned previously before as well. But yeah, if you're looking for support, how can people reach out to you?
The best way right now is through Instagram. I've heard it on every episode. We hate the platform, but right now that's the easiest way to get me. I got halfway through building a new website and just have not finished.
You haven't launched that thing yet?
I have not launched that thing yet. I'm busy trying to cook home meals at home and I have to play outside. But Fuel Joy Nutrition on Instagram, that's FUEL, Fuel Joy. That's going to be the best way to reach out. And right now I am very selective about clients. So a lot of times people who are truly sick of their shit and ready to commit and long-term start to sort things out, that's where we're working. But shoot me a message. Let me know where you're at, what you're experiencing. I'm not going to give you a keto meal plan. My homework is a little bit more extensive than that. But if you're ready and you're ready to get off it, I just absolutely love to work with people and start to have those aha moments and turn them into their own nutritionists.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All the support that you've given me over the past couple years and stuff.
I hope you keep calling me from the bathtub.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I have less bathtub like meltdowns. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully it's a bathtub like gratitude meltdown.
Yeah. I like that.
I love my body so much. Yeah. We've been through so much.
That's amazing. Okay. Well, thank you again for being here. And we will link Maddie's links in the show notes. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
And I'll be listening.
Thanks so much for sharing your time and energy with us today. We'd love to hear your feedback on how our podcast has impacted your life and are also open to suggestions for new and interesting topics. Please leave your comments with a quick review to help us grow this magical community of wellness warriors and light workers. Every month, we select one lucky reviewer to win our big magic box containing all 3 of our beautiful magic lattes. To connect with us further, check us out on Instagram at wild_remedies. Thank you again and see you at the next episode.